Hey there guys, welcome to episode 2 of my vlog. I just wanted to take a quick second and say thank you to the people who viewed my last episode. It was a really nerve-wracking thing for me to post that up, and I overcame that hump and I am ready to continue to talk to you guys. If you guys have checked out the title of the vlog, you probably know a little bit about what we're going to be talking about, so we'll get into that in a second. Before I dive too much into it, I just wanted to give a little bit more background about me. I talked a lot about the business last time, but didn't really give you too much personal history about me. So I am from a small town called Hillsburg. I grew up there for almost all of my life with my parents and my brother, and now I currently live in Ambro with my husband of about 3.5 years, and I have 2 dogs who are joining in on this episode with me today. Gary and I met at a destination wedding. His cousin married a friend of mine in the Dominican Republic, and so we were basically inseparable the whole week. And then when we were down there, we figured out that we only lived about half an hour away from each other back home, because I was currently in school in London and he lived on the family farm in Embro. So everything kind of worked out for him to take me out again when we got home. I guess from there the rest is kind of history. And as you guys know from my last one and from the title, we're going to be talking about my pregnancy, which you can't really see my belly right now because I have a dog in the way, but I'm 34 weeks pregnant today. So we're on the 6-week countdown, so who really knows what's going to happen there. We recently have gotten quite a bit better at stepping away from the business a little bit more and doing a little bit more life stuff again, which for the last few years we hadn't really been doing a ton of. We've been really focused on the business and getting that off the ground. Pregnancy has definitely been something that has helped with that, just kind of my body telling me what how much I can do and when I need to take a break and all of that, so that's been really helpful. Today's topic is going to be mostly about my first trimester of pregnancy. So as you know from the title, maybe you figured it out, maybe not, this pregnancy was actually unplanned. It was a surprise. So we hadn't been particularly trying, but we also hadn't been particularly careful either. I hadn't been on any hormonal birth control or anything like that since my car accident several years earlier. It just didn't really agree with my body, so we were just timing things and being more careful when we needed to, and it just had never really happened, so we didn't really think too much of it. There was the occasional time that I thought, if something hasn't happened yet, like, are we gonna have trouble when we do decide that it's time to have kids? But we really just didn't really think a whole lot of it, so we just kind of went on about our life. We did really start to plan what the next couple of years were going to look like as far as our business went. We had been about 3 years in and things were starting to settle down a little bit. We were starting to figure out what we had to do, and were able to take a little bit more time away, so we were looking really forward to taking some holidays, traveling a little bit more and doing all that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden we actually found out that we were pregnant. So at first it was definitely a little bit of a shock. We struggled with it a little bit at first, as I said, because we had just kind of started to figure out what these plans were going to be, how our life was going to look for the next couple of years, and so it took us a little bit, to be honest. We're very excited now, and everything kind of ironed itself out. I'm a very go with the flow kind of person, so I was able to accept things, I think, a little bit more easily than Gary was, but he got on board pretty quickly as well. We're both pretty strong believers that everything happens for a reason, and I believe in divine timing as well, so everything also happens when it's supposed to. It teaches us lessons and lines us up for what we're going to do next in our lives. So once we kind of got past all of that, it got pretty exciting, and we look forward to telling people and growing our family and figuring out what direction we were going to go and what it was going to do for us. And now we couldn't be more excited to be welcoming the little bundle in about 6 weeks or so. So going forward with that, our prenatal care is what I'll talk about next. So we found out that we were pregnant August, I believe, 12th of 2018. And so along with the shock and whatnot that initially came over us, we were also a little bit nervous because I had a pretty good party summer. I had several bachelorette parties and cottage weekends and weddings and things like that, and I didn't know I was pregnant, so I had a pretty good time and drank and partied, and so we were a little bit concerned at first as to whether or not things were going to be okay. We did learn pretty quickly that it's not a big deal that early on, and things don't really become an issue until a little bit later once everything is fully attached and brain development starts. So as far as prenatal care goes, the week after we found out, I started to make some calls to get on a list for a midwife. I called both Stratford and Thames Valley midwives. I always kind of knew I wanted a midwife ever since my aunt had my cousin. It was in the hospital, and when I was about 10 years old, my family was all there waiting for his arrival, and I didn't really know too much about it. I didn't know what was different about it, but I saw the way things were, and it seemed like it was pretty cool. So that's kind of the direction I always knew I wanted to go. And then growing up, hearing other people's stories and hearing their experiences with midwives, it just kind of solidified that was probably what I wanted to do. So from there, I did call the midwives, but I also hadn't had a doctor since I was in university. I used the campus doctor when I was there, and then I had my car accident, and so I saw lots of different surgeons, trauma surgeons, plastic surgeons, all sorts of things like that, and anything that I needed, I could basically get through them. So I didn't really have a need for another doctor for about 3+ years or so after my car accident, and I hadn't really been sick or had any real complications of any kind, so I didn't seek one out. And now that I was pregnant and didn't know necessarily if I was going to get into a midwife quickly or not, I needed to find one. So I got on with Healthcare Connect, and I found a doctor in Chelmsford, and then so I just saw him for I think 1 or 2 appointments, and he just sent me for blood work to confirm my pregnancy, and that was about it. After that, I transferred to care of a midwife. So that being said, before I had my first midwife appointment, I was pretty sick as far as morning sickness goes, about 5 weeks in. So again, about a week after we found out that we were pregnant, we had a weekend away at the cottage with my parents, and so we had planned for that weekend to be a good weekend of blender drinks and some delicious food and some relaxing, and that actually happened to be the first time that I woke up feeling really sick. I took my coffee down to the lake to just enjoy the scenery, and I texted Gary to please come down and bring some crackers or bring something and maybe some gum, because when I was down there, I had my first experience with morning sickness, and we weren't quite ready to tell my parents that early yet, so I needed to cover it up and get through it somehow. So then the rest of that day and the rest of the time, I was just kind of careful about things, had to be a little bit sneaky as far as drinking goes. My dad would make these really delicious blender drinks. I would have a sip or two and then nonchalantly pour the rest of my cup into Gary's. So that meant Gary had a pretty good weekend. He was feeling pretty good for a couple of days there, and he was a really good sport, drinking for 2 or 3, I guess, because I was not able to, and so I was really thankful for that. And then so I was sick pretty well, like it was just kind of starting that weekend, but later that week I basically started to be sick from the time I was awake in the morning, which was anywhere between 5 and 7 a.m. Up until about 3 p.m. So it was pretty tough to get through some of those days, especially at work. I had some last minute schedule changes and people covering my classes, and things were just a little weird. So I was really thankful that the team that we have at Natural Motion was able to help and cover for me during that tough time. At about 7.5 weeks, I was set to spend the weekend at my parents' place. Okay, now that you're gone, Audie, I'm gonna move over. I was set to spend the weekend at my parents' place, and I was trying to figure out what I was gonna do, but all in all, eventually we decided that we were gonna tell them, because I couldn't really pretend I was having an all-day hangover for the 2-3 days that I was there, or like a half-day flu for 3 days. So we had some shirts made up. I'm actually wearing one of them right now, by Custom Crown Creations, actually from Woodstock here, and Gary said, does this shirt make me look like a dad? And so we went and visited my parents wearing the shirts, walked in, and it took them a second, but eventually they read them and were super excited. And then when we were on our way home that weekend, we stopped and told Gary's parents as well as the rest of our siblings and such that week. So that was very exciting to share the news with everybody else. From there, I got a call at about 8 weeks that I got in with the midwives, and so my first appointment was made for 10 weeks with them, and then after I saw them for the first time, I got in for an ultrasound to date my pregnancy, and so that ultrasound was done at about 11.5 weeks or so. It happened to fall on our 3rd anniversary, actually, so that was a pretty cool, exciting day for us. Once we went to the ultrasound and found out that everything was looking good, we did decide to publicly announce that day, because it had been pretty tough to continuously keep that secret, especially being how sick I had been. The sickness actually did start to calm down about 10 weeks or so. I would be sick only from about 5 in the morning till about 10 in the morning, so things were starting to improve a little bit, which was a nice change. And it was really exciting to share the news with everybody. It made it feel a lot more real, and seeing that heartbeat and that little baby on the screen made it that much more real and exciting. I was like, okay, cool, I'm not just sick and getting fat for no reason. So yeah, that was all great. Once we had our first couple midwife appointments, we started talking about what our options were, and I had always we both have just always kind of assumed that we would do a hospital birth with a midwife, and then we just started to kind of talk some options a little bit more. I was asking some questions at my appointments, and I really actually did start to consider a home birth option. Although I did talk about my car accident in the last episode, so I had many surgeries, I think like between 9 and 11 surgeries over 3 years, and I spent 2 weeks in the hospital initially with my car accident. So although I had fantastic care while I was at the hospital, and with all my surgeries, I can't complain about anything. It really was as good of an experience as it can be, but I still had a negative association with the hospital. I associated the hospital with a traumatic, difficult, painful time in my life, and ever since that experience, walking into a hospital just kind of puts me a little bit on edge, and it's definitely not my most relaxed environment. So I did start to consider the home birth option. That being said, my two biggest support people that I knew I was going to want present at the birth, no matter where we decided to do it, was Gary, obviously, and my mom. And so I expressed to them that that was an option that I was considering, and both of their jaws about hit the floor. When I told them that at first, I was like, oh shit, like, I don't know if this is maybe something I'm going to be able to consider or not if my two biggest support people are not on board. So that's kind of where we left that. And then I'll continue on in my next video about the decision that we landed on and how we worked through it once I get into talking about second trimester. So I hope that you guys got a little bit of insight and have enjoyed listening. Thank you so much for tuning in, and if you want to keep up with everything that's going on, please subscribe to my channel. I'm going to continuously talk about my pregnancy and birth for the next couple of episodes as we approach it, and then I'll come into all sorts of different types of stuff like how-to videos and all that fun stuff, because I love doing stuff in the kitchen, and several of you probably know that I love health and fitness, as that's what my business surrounds. So if you want to stay tuned, hit subscribe down below, and we will see you next time.